So when it comes to sending email, how often should you be sending it? What time of day and week is the best? And how do you strike that balance between sending too much and not communicating enough? Hey there, it's Matthew Warner, and this is the Finding Uno Show. Well, welcome back to the Finding Uno Show. Who's Uno? Oh, you know Uno. He's that one lost sheep that the shepherd leaves the 99 to go after, and we are here to help you find him. My name is Matthew Warner. I am your host, and joining me is my co-host, Matthew Sewell. How's it going, Matt?
Hey, good. Always glad to be with you.
Today, we are talking about email frequency. How often should you send it? What time of day and week is best? A lot of leaders struggle with knowing, am I saying enough or am I saying too much? Am I over communicating or am I under communicating? Am I sending this too much or am I not sending enough? So what do you usually tell people, Matt, when they ask this question? Is it a straightforward answer?
Yeah, the answer is short, but it almost can seem like a cop out because it's usually it depends, right? It depends on who you're sending it to, right? So if it's the daily newsletter that we expect at every morning at 8 a.m, and then we hear from the crabby old ladies who expect it with their coffee and it didn't get there till 8:05, like we hear from some churches. Then it's great to send every day. But if it's your whole church to 8,000 people, or even 400 or 500 or whatever, then it's probably a really bad idea to send every day. So I would say, it depends, right?
Yeah, it
depends
depends.
on who you're sending it to.
Yeah, people don't want to hear that answer. It depends, because they want the sort of, just tell me the right answer, the clear right answer. Send it on this day at this time, this often, and it's just not that easy. And I think when people are asking that question, they want the easy answer, but it really is, the true answer is it depends. And you have to learn to look at your circumstances, to look at what you're doing and why you're doing it. And so the first place to start, what I tell people is, after you say it depends, is you have to understand why you're sending the message in the first place. And so this is on all of these issues. When you have a question on communication, you have to understand its teleology, right? So what is its purpose? What is its end? Because that's the only way you can know whether it's achieving it or not. So you might say, well, this email looks great. Well, sure, but it could be a terrible email. You could say, and we've all seen this with like commercials and different ad campaigns. We're like, that's a genius creative marketing campaign because we thought it was clever or we thought it was interesting or entertaining. But did it really achieve its end? We don't know. What the end was to sell more of that product, and you don't remember the name of that thing after you watched it. Maybe it was a terrible commercial. And so same with our email and all of our communications, is understanding its end. So what is its purpose? Because only then can you say, is it achieving that end? So you have to understand, why am I sending this? And then is it achieving it, to know whether or not it's working the way it's supposed to. So that's kind of a fundamental thing on all of these issues, no matter what it is you got to understand that first. And that's why anyone from the outside that's trying to give you a cookie cutter answer of, oh, you should always send on Wednesdays at 8 a.m., or you should send on Fridays at 5 p.m., whatever the circumstance is, they're missing that. They're shortchanging the process, because there's no way they can answer that for you and your situation, because it does really depend on the context.
Yeah, I always the phrase, I'd never thought of it until just now, but the phrase just came to mind: avoid random acts of email. Just in general, I mean, to go along with what probably by now on episode 4 is, we're saying this too often. I didn't have time to write you a short email, so I wrote you a long one. A corollary to that is avoid random acts of email. It seems like, because I mean, we have to be intentional, but not too intentional. It's just like kind of finding the happy medium, I guess, right? So can you maybe think of like a specific example? So I mean, the obvious one would be, a weekly newsletter. So that's easy. It's like, okay, we build an expectation that Friday at noon, everybody's going to have their, Friday newsletter from the church, whatever. But what about like those, the temptation to send, every event sounds really important. Every event is important in its own right. But for like a whole church, right, as just one hypothetical, what would be the way to kind of walk through to find the best time and how often they should
Good,
send
good.
something like that.
Yeah, so you started off in the right place, I think, which is some things based on their purpose already determine the frequency and maybe a good time of week to send it. So, like you said, the weekly email from the pastor that is sending out, here's the readings or what we're going to be doing this weekend, this Sunday. It has a natural rhythm that's a weekly email. And I think that's good for us to talk about maybe first is because a lot of churches are trying to figure out, well, what's our sort of backbone of our communication? How often should we be sending things? And a weekly email is sort of the backbone for most churches of their sort of rhythm of communication because you meet weekly, typically Sundays come once a week, and it's a natural rhythm. So I've seen, I don't know how often you've seen, but it seems like most churches find Friday to be a pretty good day to send their weekly email out. Have you seen some other good examples that seem to work well?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's one church in California who's kind of, a pet favorite of mine where they, we both work for Flocknote. So they call it the Friday Flocknote. And so now it's like militantly, like that's the example I was thinking of with the old lady who's crabby if it comes at 12:05 or not till 12:10 because the communication director was a little late or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, I don't really have a good answer to that. I mean,
Yeah.
the best examples I can think of are Friday, but I think
Yeah.
any day
Well,
of
if
the
it
week.
has Flocknote in the title, then the alliteration determines
Right.
which day a week that it should go on, which is Friday. But we've just naturally seen that just in our experience with most churches. Friday tends to be a good day. Now, you could pick another day and have it work really well for you as well. Mondays following up after the weekend, telling you what's going on this whole week is not a bad day also. But Friday is a good one because it gives people a chance to plan for the weekend, to what might be happening that weekend, to prepare for the readings or the topic or whatever you're going to be doing on Sunday. So anyway, just as sort of a starter for most churches, that weekly rhythm is really is a good frequency for your main communications that kind of go out to everybody.
Yeah. Okay. So then with the weekly email, what are some other factors? So not to give a teaser for our next episode with segmenting lists, but you're not necessarily going to want to send, to your master list because you don't want to deteriorate that. So using that as a building block, then what's the next step beyond that?
Yeah. So a few factors I think that make it, first of all, looking further at what the activity is. So obviously a daily devotional that should be sent every day. Those are easy. Some of the other ones get harder. And so here's some factors to think about when you're considering how often should we send something. And a lot of times the question is more like, well, we've sent a lot lately and we really want to promote this other thing we're doing, or we want to send another email about this other event or another reminder about the thing we've told them about a few times, but it's happening this week. Should we send it or not? And that's kind of often one of the practical questions leaders have at churches is, have we already beat them up a lot? Have we already sent a lot of emails? So the first thing is to know a lot of the data around this. How many emails have you sent to them this week? And this is a hard question for some churches because they don't know the answer to that. Because they might say, well, I've sent them one email this week, but has the youth minister also sent them an email? And the director of faith formation also sent them an email? And the event that they're going to in a couple of weeks also sent them another email? And the retreat they're involved in also sent them another text message or some other communication? um, you don't know unless you're really tracking that in some coherent system. So that's one of the reasons we developed Flocknote, to have that consistency across all of your ministries communicating using the same tool. Is now you have one place where you can actually go and look at a given person and know how often have they heard from us lately. Are we bombarding them, or are they not heard from us in a while? So it's really important to understand that as the basis for making a lot of these decisions. But certainly some other factors that come into play. So one is your relationship with them. So the better your relationship with people, the more often you can send to them. That's just a general rule. So if I don't know you that well and I haven't developed a relationship with you, maybe we're kind of new, I've earned less of a right to send you more frequent communication. So the better, closer to the relationship, the more often you can send. Um, the other, probably the most important one, is how good is it? How valuable is it? Is it a good email or a bad email? Because if you send me a lot of really good emails, maybe I'll be excited when I get another good email from you. But if I get a lot of bad emails that are boring, that don't pertain to me, and we're going to talk about that in the next episode, segmenting lists to get information to the right people, not saying everything to everybody. That's an important thing. So how good has the email been? So the better you get at sending email, the more often you can communicate with people. The closer your relationship with people, the more often you can communicate with them. So those are really important things. And you hit on another really important factor, and that's consistency. So you mentioned the person that was complaining because they were expecting the email at 12 and it didn't show up till 12:05. That's what you want. That's one of the best things to have with people that are reading your email is anticipation. So if you want everybody anticipating your email, if you try this 1 week and miss sending out an email, and this is a good test to do, skip an email 1 week and see how many people complain. If nobody complains, then you got to look at your email list, what you're sending, and really question whether it's worth sending out. Because if nobody missed it, then maybe you shouldn't send it. Now, not everyone's going to speak up, but it's a good way to test how valuable it is. If you're doing a good job and you've built good relationships, then being consistent is important because people will learn to anticipate it. And then when they miss it, they're like, hey, where was it? And that's exactly what you want, because that means they value it, and it's a good sign that you're doing something right. But consistency is important so that they know when to expect it and how often to hear from you. And so if it's erratic and I hear from you 5 times in 1 week and then I don't hear from you again for a couple of months, then it throws people off, and they don't know how to process it, in the sense that when I get the next one, I'm like, oh man, I get too many emails. I just got 5 from you this week. I'm unsubscribing. I'm not in for getting 5 emails a week from you. I'm good with 1 a month, but not for 5 a week. So if you're inconsistent, they don't know what to expect. And then they can't make a judgment of whether or not they want to stay a part of this or not, because they don't know how often they're going to hear from you. So, and that's a good tactic up front as well, is to communicate how often. That's one of the things we try to tell people when you're asking someone to join a list or to get involved, is to be upfront and clear about how often you're going to hear from me. So sign up for our weekly email. We're only going to send to you once a week. You can unsubscribe anytime. Be upfront with that communication, so that they can then say, okay, once a week, great, I'm in. Every day, nah, no, thank you. So it just depends on the situation and what the context is. But that upfront communication is really important.
Yeah, I was just thinking too. I can think of a few examples through the years where there's been churches who just their team isn't on the same page. Like that seems like another crucial point. Again, we're not necessarily answering when and how often should I send email, because that really depends on the list. But there's the principles that like undergird everything that helps you make a good decision with that. So like I think of, not to throw my own church under the bus, but they've since improved a whole bunch. But like 2 or 3 years ago, I remember there was a point where like on 1 week, I think there was one day where I got 3 emails, each from a different person, and another day that week I got 2 emails, both from the person like the secretary or whatever. And I was like, you guys, like this, I'm invested, and I know that it's all gonna be interesting, but like you almost got to pretend that like the person who's going to get your email, all of the people who are going to get your email have their finger on the unsubscribe button, like ready to push it, just like give me a reason, right? I mean, it's probably not that bad, but in a certain sense, like how easy is it to just click a button and say I'm good. It's not to like put a whole bunch of pressure on, but you just like got to be on the same page to say, okay, here's our policy, loosely written, maybe like Jim is the only one who can send to the whole parish, and if you have something you want to put in there, Jim is the gatekeeper, and what he says goes, and too bad so sad if your event doesn't make it in, just because we have to preserve that. But here's a list of your own that you can send to your heart's content, and good luck. And if everybody unsubscribes, then here's hoping that doesn't happen, but it doesn't deteriorate everything else. But yeah, maybe just making sure everybody's on the same page, and being just being a little bit brutal in terms of dictating what gets to go out and what doesn't get to go out. But more than once a day.
Most churches need to up their standard of what is email worthy, what is worth the time. And it's the same for what makes it in the bulletin. It's the same for what makes it into the announcements on Sunday. they need to up their game in terms of like the standard of like what's worthy of fitting in there, because it reminds me of that Office episode where
I was just
Andy
thinking of the same one.
Andy
Yeah.
gets Daryl's cell phone number and he starts texting him too much, and he challenges him. He said, I'm about to block you unless you come up with, like, you raise your game of like what is worthy of sending a text message to me. And he ends up satisfying that in the end, I remember. But what is it, like some birds eating ice cream or something outside?
In the parking lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. That was a good one. Okay, so beyond that though, like I think another thing you need to have the ability to do is look at the data for how successful your communications were. So this goes back to what I said at the beginning, is understanding the purpose of the communication and then measuring whether you actually succeeded. So you have to, so in order to know if your email in this case succeeded, you have to know what the purpose of it was. That's the only way to know whether it succeeded or not. So you have to be clear on those things, but then actually have a way to measure it. So but there's other indicators like an open rate, click-through rates, unsubscribe rates. And you can also just ask people. You can say, hey, how often do you want to hear from us? Don't be afraid to just ask. You could send out a poll in your email and say, hey, would you prefer to hear from me once a day, once a week, once a month? And just get a feel for, or what kinds of data is worth hearing from. You like this stuff, this stuff, this stuff, this stuff, and let them pick what is important to them and what's not. And that can help you learn what's email worthy. But you got to be tracking that data too. So you can try sending on a certain day a week and a certain time of day and see if it works better. See if it gets the results better. See if more people show up. See if more people open it. See if more people click through or sign up for whatever it is you're trying to get them to sign up for. So experiment, but then you got to track the data. So you got to be measuring success in some way. And then for your situation, it's going to be different. But it does help. Like what I try to do, because every situation is different, put yourself in the shoes of the person you're sending it to. If you're sending it to um, a bunch of men, older adult men that are at work during the day and are busy, doing other things throughout the day, the workday, sending them a email during the middle of the workday might not be very successful because they don't have time to look at it. They're not checking it. And by the time they go to check their personal inbox, it's buried by a bunch of other email that have come, so maybe you learn that those people like to get home and have dinner and then check their personal email at 8 o'clock at night. So maybe sending it at 6 or 7 o'clock on the evening is going to get you better open rates than sending it at 8 a.m. So think about the person you're sending it to, and where they're at that time of day during that part of the week, and see if that's a time that they're going to want to get a message from you. And so just put yourself in their shoes and think through it. That can help you kind of get close, and then you can try some things and experiment with it and really measure what works and what doesn't. But use things like scheduling features. That's something built into Flocknote and most tools. Like you can schedule when your message is going to go out, so it's easy to experiment. It's if you're up late at night working on it at midnight, that doesn't mean that that's the best time to send it. Maybe it's better for it to send out at 8 a.m. so that right after they wake up, it pops into their inbox. So think about all those different kind of things. Use the tools well to experiment and look at the data and see what's really working.
Yeah, I like that. And maybe it was one last other parting thought. I always like the acronym ABT, always be tinkering. Because I mean, you're never going to know what's going to work until you start trying all those different things. I was like thinking about that. I feel like it's so easy for folks who are doing church things because everybody has 17 million different jobs and next to no time. So it's like, oh, I just want to like do something and set it and like set the process and not worry about it. But I think we touched on an earlier episode maybe, but just, I mean, this communication effort is more than just sending an email. You're doing more than just telling them about something right now. You're cultivating relationships with them for the long term. And so it just will bode really well. It's the exact same as, saving for your future when you're 25, so you can reap the benefit when you're 60. You might be investing a lot of time up front, But once you figure out what really works, ideally you're going to have to tinker less and less over time. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I think, yeah.
Yeah, and I would suggest keep it all in context that this is worth a little bit of your time to figure out what best time of day and week during the week that you should send something, but it's not worth a lot of time. Like it's a small factor in whether or not your improvement in reaching your people. Too often we get distracted by these things. Is I need to figure out the exact time to send it, and I need to do this research. And what we should be doing is spending a little bit more time on what we're actually writing in the email and whether or not it's worth being in there, and making that really great. That's where most of your time should be spent. So these things are good things to learn, but don't let them, become distractions. And again, remember the biggest factors in these is what you have a good relationship with them. Is the value really good? Are you consistent? If you're doing those things, like the rest kind of takes care of itself. People are going to be anticipating it no matter when you send it, and they're not going to mind getting extra information as long as they're getting it more frequently, as long as they're enrolled, they find it valuable whenever they end up engaging in it.
All right, well, that wraps it up for our topic for today. Before we go, we always like to take a question from one of our listeners, so we're going to bounce over to our People Got Church Problems segment. Okay, our question for today, Jameson asks, it annoys me when texts from the church just link to something else, like a post or the bulletin, rather than also including the meat of what I need to know in the text in a short and sweet way. I'm tired of getting numerous clickbait-style texts from church, which basically just send me a link rather than just telling me what I need to know. So I guess that's more of a statement. So maybe the question could be, how could my church do better and annoy me less, maybe?
Yes. Yeah. The main answer is don't do that. Don't just text people a link and expect them to go click in it. I think we see that more with churches where they're frustrated that someone's not reading an email, so then they text the email to them, and uh, or no one's visiting a website or doing something that they want them to do, and so they just text it to them. And you can do that sometimes when you really need to. It's really important, but overdoing that just will frustrate people like Jameson is here, because the value of a text is that it itself communicates a lot in a short space. And so if you're wasting that space to just say, hey, go click over here to find out what I really want to tell you, um, first of all, you're going to frustrate people. Second, you're missing out on the real value of text messaging, because the reason texts get such a great communication open rate, so to speak, is that they're short and to the point. So you've basically ruined that part of it if you're not making it short and you're not getting to the point. So every once in a while you can do that, but you need to mix in something that motivates them to want to click that link. So that you need to, in that short space you have in a text message, get to the point, do something that convinces them and motivates them to want to then click the link. If you need more info, click here. You want to sign up, click here. You want to participate in this amazing thing I just described to you and was really intriguing and entertaining and fun and exciting, and you don't want to miss out on, click this link. And then they can click that and go take the next steps, learn more, read more information, all of that. So don't waste that space in a text message. And also make sure you're not using it as a patch of like, people aren't opening your emails, so now I'm going to text it to them, and so you're kind of doing both channels badly now. So yeah, it's a valid complaint, and certainly one that churches need to learn to avoid.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, I hope that was help, Jameson. Thank you again for asking that question. Before we head out, thank you again, everyone, for listening / watching, depending on where you're consuming this great Finding Uno show episode. But we're going to pass it over to our friend Liz before we wrap things up to find out where Uno is today.
Howdy, friends. This week, we found Uno out on the West Coast. We received this snapshot from the mission parishes in the Archdiocese of San Francisco, and 5 members of their team are wearing their classic navy blue Uno tees, and let me tell you, they wear them well. Thank you to Father Moises, Martin, and the team for sending us this photo. It totally made our day. If you find Uno, we want to see your photo. So whether it's you or your team rocking an Uno tee or sporting our flock socks, maybe it's a picture of our classic Uno sticker on your laptop, water bottle, or journal, Or perhaps you took a drive out to greener pastures and spotted Uno and his cousins grazing in the field. Whatever it may be, we want to see it. So send those photos to us at howdy@findinguno.com and we may feature you in a future episode. Also, we would love it if you could leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. In fact, we'd love it so much that we want to send you a pair of our super special flock socks. So if you leave us an Apple Podcast review, send us an email letting us know. Again, that's howdy@findinguno.com, and we will drop some socks in the mail for you. Until then, we'll see you next time on the Finding Uno Show.